What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and I'm back with another episode of Loving Wrestling for Fightful Overbooked. And today, I'm joined by the Trivia King, a very nice man. That is the man you know as Greg Cherry from the Greg Cherry brand. So welcome to the show.
It's good to talk to you, Tom. How are you?
I'm good. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, my friend. So if we take this back, do you remember the moment, not that you first discovered wrestling, but that you realize, oh, this is my thing now. I love this.
So that would take me back about 30 years. I started watching wrestling in about mid 1992. SummerSlam 1992 was actually the first show I remember distinctly watching. And it had to have been early around then. My dad actually got me a couple of action figures to start my collection off. And the first two wrestling action figures I ever got were Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. So to start out with two of the Horsemen to start that collection was a pretty good way to start, if you ask me. So it was around that time frame where I just really started to get into it, started watching it, started paying attention to it, and just really enjoying it.
So I have to ask, when you got these first two action figures, did you have a ring? Did you play with them, or were they just sort of, these are on the window, on the wall sort of thing?
I wasn't sure what to do with them at first. My dad actually built like a ring out of wood and like just like regular ropes that you use to like hook onto stuff, not like anything like that. But and it was cool. I think I still have it somewhere. It might still be at my parents' house for all I know. But I do have a good chunk of wrestlers here that I keep, and still a few down there that I have to get. But yeah, it was quite a collection for a while. I stopped collecting maybe in my teenage years because they started to get expensive even back then. I mean, they're about 15, 20 bucks a pop now. So it's very tough. But yeah, that was what really got me started, was those couple action figures and just being able to do whatever I could with those.
You talked about SummerSlam 92 being the pay-per-view that you first saw. Do you remember a match that specifically made you realize, okay, I love wrestling now?
Yeah, the main event, Bret Hart and the British Bulldog. That's such a classic match. And I say that all the time, and I feel like I have not gone back and watched that match enough to really appreciate it now. So that's something I plan on doing, is going back and watching some of the old SummerSlams or WrestleManias. Go check those out, because there are some guys, believe it or not, as much of a trivia guy as I am, there are some WrestleManias and SummerSlams that I still have not seen yet.
That surprises me. I will not lie.
I know there's a lot out there that's like, wow, you know about this stuff, but you've never watched it. So I do have gaps, believe it or not.
What is you talk about having gaps there, and I interrupted you. I do apologize.
No,
what is your the gap that most people would think Greg would know that? What is the thing that maybe you don't know that people would think Greg Cherry would know that?
Original ECW. I am terrible at original ECW. It was never something I watched growing up. I have gone back and watched a couple pay-per-views since, like the network, Peacock, and all that stuff came out. But I was never a big fan of it growing up. I was always WWE, WCW, and some local promotions even before I watched original ECW. So it was never something I got into. It's not that I didn't care for it. Now that I watch death matches all the time. I shouldn't say all the time, but more frequently.
I know what you mean, though.
Yeah. More frequently than I did back then. It's something I should go take a look at, because there's a lot of good stuff, original ECW.
So you talked about the main event of SummerSlam 92 being a match that makes you think, oh, I love wrestling. What is a match like? Doesn't have to be current day, but what is a match that you go back and watch? Maybe if you're burned out, or you think, maybe I don't love wrestling anymore. What is the match that you go back and watch and you're like, this is why I love wrestling?
It's going to sound weird, but some of my favorite matches are battle royals, which are not like technical classics by any means, but I can throw on a battle royal. It doesn't matter from what time period, what company, and I can just relax. It's like, this is chaos, but I love it.
Does that
But
include Royal Rumbles, or do you view
oh,
them as two separate things?
I am of anything I am specialized in wrestling trivia with. The Royal Rumble match itself is it. Somebody once asked me who was the 23rd entrant in the greatest Royal Rumble, and I had to think about it for a second, but I got it.
I've got one for you if you don't mind.
It was Drew Gulak,
Oh
but
wow.
it was so obscure. I was like, man, I've only watched the Greatest Royal Rumble maybe like twice, so I figured it was like an obscure name. So I just threw one out there. It was the right answer. It's like you can't like think about stuff like that. It's just crazy the ridiculous knowledge I have with the Rumble.
Mm. So you talked about there your ridiculous, not in your own words, your ridiculous knowledge of wrestling trivia at times.
Yeah.
So how did you, for people that may not know, how did you discover trivia? How did wrestling trivia become your thing? Things like that.
It was never really something that I had thought about doing. It was just I had watched a lot of wrestling, and if I watch something enough times, I'm able to retain sometimes very specific details of a thing. And when the Wrestling Trivia Challenge first started out um, back in 2017, it was something that's like, this would be fun to do. I'm going to try it out. I did win the championship a couple times, and then eventually retired it this earlier this year because there wasn't anybody who could beat me for it. Not to say that there isn't anybody who could beat me in wrestling trivia, just for that specific style of show.
Mm.
Um, I went, I just went on a run, and it was a lot of fun. It got me on Quizlemania through all that stuff, and through uh, very much a push from guys like Sean Ross Sapp,
Yeah.
Yangi, and uh, Alex, Queen of the Ring. There are quite a few people behind that.
Mm. So I feel like people that have watched my show will know, or people that have watched your appearance on the spotlight will know. So but just briefly, we got to
Yeah.
talk about it because you brought it up. How did the Quizlemania thing come about?
The Quizlemania thing came about because I bugged the guys from Wrestle Talk for like 2 years. And so like it started out, they didn't really know. It was like I kind of push and push and push. And then eventually I super chatted like, hey, get me on the show. And then I made like a bigger push. I did admittedly get a little annoying about it. So I apologize for that. But after a while, um, I really started to like, maybe my approach isn't right. Maybe I need to be more respectful of what I'm trying to get, which I think really helped turn the corner. It got me a bunch of friends in the wrestling media sphere. And that's where I think guys like Sean and girls like Alex and Saeed Yangi and SP3 and a whole bunch of people just really started to push for me to get that spot. And it was so cool once it finally happened. Um, that it was very emotional for me. Like you would
Mm.
think it's just a YouTube show. How big of a deal is it for me? But it's one of those things that when you work for something so hard, if you push for something so hard and you believe that you can earn that spot or earn that position or whatever, it's such an awesome feeling realizing
Mm.
it. And it's not something that has happened a ton in my life, but that was very satisfying to finally make that happen.
What is the next? You brought up there how satisfying it was to get on Quizlemania. What is the next? Because we'll lead into the next question of 5 people you love within wrestling media. Who is the next 5 people that you're like, I'd love to work with them, I'd love to be on their show, etc.
Yeah, I would still love to work with Sean. As much interaction as we've had, we've never been able to be on the same
That
show.
hasn't happened. That is surprising.
Yeah, it's surprising. We've talked about it a few times. The schedules have just never lined up. Denise Salcedo's another one, but I know she's insanely busy and probably booked for the next year and a half. I would love to work with Chris Van Vliet at some point. I just think he does a great job with his interviews. And there are a bunch of people in wrestling media that I see, whether it's on YouTube or TikTok or Twitter, that I just want to be involved with so many people and just be in that circle. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
just think it'd be so cool to interact with as many people as possible and maybe unite the community a little more. I know sometimes people in the community are kind of jags to each other, for lack of a better term. But I think that kindness and showing respect, like doing all that, it's not that hard. It really isn't.
No,
So, as many people as I can work with in wrestling media, I will say yes. The Wrestle Talk guys too. Like I've never worked with Luke Owen or Ollie Davis or Pete Quinnell or because I have worked with Tempest and Sat, Adam, obviously for that episode of Quizmania. But there's still guys with the Wrestle Talk team that I'd like to work with as well.
So you brought up there, it's obvious how passionate you are about wrestling and the community and things of that nature. So what would you ever do? What do you do sort of when you become like, okay, I've watched far too much wrestling in the last week. I need to take a step back. How do you avoid the burnout? How do you how do I explain this? How do you just sort of keep your fandom alive and love wrestling even when you're immersed in it quite a lot?
It's actually surprising. Over the last year or so, I have not watched weekly television that often. So I keep up with it by watching people react on Twitter. I do try and catch Dynamite as much as possible. I occasionally catch Raw or SmackDown, the occasional Collision as well. It's just very hard. Number one, being married and not being paid to watch it, it's very hard to continually keep up with it because there is so much. That's not a bad thing if you love wrestling. It's not a bad thing with there being that much wrestling. But between renovating a house and, trying to spend time with my wife and trying to find a job on top of it, it's just a lot to try and fit wrestling in there. I do try to, but at the same time, it gets very difficult.
Yeah.
If it was a position I was paid to do, like if I got paid to review wrestling, that would be obviously fantastic because I would have no problem doing it. I was like, I'm getting paid for something I enjoy doing. Absolutely. I will do that. And there are a lot of great people who do that. And I try not to do that on my channel just because there are so many other people doing it that I don't just want to become a carbon copy. That's why the Greg Cherry Show is what it is. It does talk about wrestling, it does talk about sports, but I also try and let people have a good time with the show. I don't want to over inundate with just review talk and stuff like that. It's like you can get that pretty much anywhere else. So that's why I try to be different.
So you talked about there trying to be different and stuff. What is it you think makes the Greg Cherry Show different to everything? I know you talked about it a little bit, but if I was to say to you one word that makes the Greg Cherry Show different than everything else, what would it be?
I don't know if I could sum it up in one word. Insanity, I guess, because we have this thing on our show where if somebody donates to the show, I spin a wheel. I do whatever the wheel says, whether it's a wrestling entrance, whether I just sing karaoke. There's spots on that wheel for me to exercise, which may or may not be as much as exercise as I actually get. There's people can call into the show. There's a lot of different options on there, and I think it makes the show different because you never know what to expect from that wheel and what people are going to request. Like I did a Greg Cherry show on a Saturday here a couple of weeks ago, and one of the requests was for Candice Michelle's entrance.
I've seen this.
Yes. So doing stuff like that, and I have no shame. I have no problem doing stuff like that because it entertains the people. So anybody who comes along and watches that is like, this guy's weird. Why is he doing all these entrances? It's like, first of all, if you watch my TikTok, I've done many different women's entrances. It's actually my most viewed video on TikTok doing those. So I have no problem. I just want to show my love of wrestling and how, like, the little things for the entrances. I try and get that because a lot of people just do like the big things. It's like there's a lot of little intricacies in wrestling in the entrances and really any wrestling that a lot of people don't pick up on. And that's what I like to pick up on is those little things.
I understand what you're saying completely there. I know you said you don't watch a lot of wrestling, but when you do, who do you love watching wrestling alongside to bring it back to loving wrestling?
Well, my wife actually is not a huge fan of wrestling. She'll watch it with me. But I do talk to my best friend Travis about it all the time. He's actually somebody that uh, between him and my wife that we've gone to a WrestleMania. We went to WrestleMania in Miami, and
Ooh.
that was an incredible experience. So we got to see The Undertaker and Triple H and Hell in a Cell and Rock versus Cena for the first time. So that was a lot of fun, and he and I are planning on going to Philadelphia this year. So hopefully that'll be a good time as well. Other people, my co-hosts of the Greg Cherry Show, Jeff Meacham, Matty Laws, love talking about wrestling with them. Um, Aside from that, there aren't a ton of people in this area that I invite over, unless it's the Royal Rumble, which again is my event to watch. I briefly
Yeah.
go over the Rumble all the time, and we play this little Rumble game where it's like, hey, if you draw the number of the winner of the Royal Rumble, then you win the game and stuff like that. We do a version of that on the Greg Cherry Show too. It's like, hey, you donate $5, that person wins the Rumble, you win the whole prize pool, stuff like that. And we did something like that. We raised money for Jessie Davitt because she was going through some medical stuff, and we did that, and we donated half the funds to her just to help raise money. It was kind of like a 50-50 type deal. I didn't win anything, but with the purpose of what we were doing, that's perfectly fine. I had no problem taking the L there.
Yeah.
So it was just something cool to do.
It's obvious how. No, we talked about that. So as we look at wrapping this up pretty soon, Greg, because I do want to be respectful of your time. If I said to you 3 moments in the current, actually, have we talked about burnout? My brain has gone a bit shit. We have, haven't we?
It's okay.
Yeah.
I do have the questions that you sent me, and 3 wrestlers from history that made me love wrestling.
Yeah.
Well, Shawn Michaels is my favorite of all time. You might not hear this combination of 3 anywhere else except me. Shawn Michaels, Shane McMahon, and Mercedes Moné.
Okay, I understand number 1 and number 2, number 3, but why does number 2 speak to you?
I don't know how to explain it, but I have always watched and enjoyed the things that Shane McMahon has done in the ring, because he is not a full-time wrestler. He never has been. But he will go out there and do whatever it takes to steal the show. And he's actually half of my favorite wrestling match of all time, him and Kurt Angle at King of the Ring. I don't know why, but my rabid fandom of Shane McMahon is sometimes unexplainable, but I've just enjoyed him. When he came back in 2016, I was happy.
How did you feel when he tore his quad at this past Mania?
It hurt my heart because it was such a roller coaster of emotions, because when he came back, we all thought he was gone from the previous Royal Rumble. And then he came back, nobody knew about it, and I was ecstatic. And then tore his quad, and the moment kind of got soured for me. It's like, I hope he's doing better. I saw he was training 3 weeks after he did that. So
that was
Shane
insane.
McMahon's an absolute beast. Yeah, it must be in the McMahon genes to just be athletic beast. And I've always loved Shane.
And then what about 3 moments or wrestlers or matches from the current, as we record this in July 2023, that you're I enjoy this?
Well, Bianca Belair, I think, is absolutely fantastic at everything she does. Fantastic athlete, fantastic wrestler, charisma, just coming from everywhere. She's spectacular. Also, Ricky Starks. I really enjoy Ricky Starks. He just won the Owen tournament. Absolutely fantastic. Again, charisma personified. And also, I'm very happy that they're having the success that they are now, because during the pandemic era, I was like, I really like these guys. I think they're going to do big things. It's the Acclaimed. I really enjoy the Acclaimed. So happy for Max and Anthony, and of course Billy Gunn, who joined a little bit ago. I'm just so happy for all the good things that are happening with the Acclaimed.
That's very cool to hear, my friend. So the question I end this show on, Greg, is do you believe, it's obvious how passionate you are about wrestling currently, but do you believe you will always love wrestling?
I think so. In some aspects, I think I always will love wrestling. Um, will it always be my first love? Depends on if it's football season. um, because when American football season starts, that is my bread and butter. I will actually watch football over wrestling, and that has been the
Ah,
case for the last few years. Just because it's not around all the time. Wrestling is around all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, it goes 52 weeks a year. Football season is kind of condensed. So whenever that happens, it's like last year there was a college football game and the Survivor Series happening at the same time, and I was watching college football. So
Hmm,
it might surprise a lot of people for as much stuff as I know about wrestling, but I do enjoy my sports, so I can't walk away from that. But I will always have a soft spot for wrestling. Will always be.
that's very cool to hear, my friend. So as we wrap this up, where can the good people find you? Any content you want to promote, etc.
You can find me basically on all social media at Greg Cherry Brand, all one word. The Greg Cherry Show airs live every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or Daylight Time or whatever it is. Yeah, 7 p.m. Daylight Time. Who knows? Daylight savings might be going well. You can also check out the Jeff Meacham Network for all stuff. I'm included with that. You can check out reviews and watch alongs and a whole bunch of stuff that simulcast on the Break Cherry brand. So go check that out. And that's about it for me.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Fightful Overbooked on YouTube. So follow them on Twitter. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube, Tom Talk Trash, where I interview the greats in wrestling media about their overall fandom. This fine gentleman has been on the channel before. And follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash, and I will see you in the next episode of Loving Wrestling. Goodbye now.